Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordy and Glory video. In today's episode we are going to be doing another unit review, and this time we are going to be taking a look at everybody's favourite gas mask boys. It is the Death Korps of Krieg. So the Death Korps of Krieg are a troop choice in the new Astra Militarum Codex. Now this is actually quite interesting because previously they've either been a Forge World option or you've had to take them as regular infantry squads in the old 8th edition Codex. But now they have their own separate datasheet and it's pretty good. Each one of these squads is going to come with 9 troopers and a Watchmaster. Now the Watchmaster is basically just a fancy name for their sergeant. Now, what's really cool about the Death Korps of Krieg datasheet is that they actually have a huge amount of options. They're an incredibly versatile infantry choice. Really interestingly, they actually come with a plasma gun guy as standard. You don't have to choose it as one of your upgrades. It comes inbuilt into the squad. Now you can actually swap that plasma gun guy out for something else, or you can take 2 additional special weapons to support him. You can take a radio guy, you can take a medic, and the sergeant has access to some of the most varied war gear in the troop choices. Now we're going to get into the different loadouts available to Death Korps Krieg later on in this video, but the main takeaway at this point is that they are incredibly versatile and they can be tailored to whatever role you need them to perform in your army. So that is an overview of the Death Korps of Krieg, but now let's dive into and drill down further into the specifics of this unit. So the first thing that you're going to notice is that the Death Korps have the same stat line as all the other infantry options in your army. They've got weapon skill, ballistic skill 4+, they move 6 inches, they've got a strength 3, a toughness 3, 1 wound, 1 attack, leadership 6 apart from 7 on the sergeant, and they've got a 5+ save as standard. The Watchmaster has basically got the same stat line except for, like I said, he's got an extra pip of leadership and he's got an extra attack as well. So you might be asking yourself, well, what's so special about these guys? If they're just the same as all the other infantry, what makes them stand out? Well, what really sets them apart is how durable these squads can be. They come as standard inbuilt to their datasheet, a ability called the Death Korps. And each time an attack is made against this unit, a wound roll of a 1 or a 2 always fails. It's an ability that's often known throughout the 40k community as mini transhuman. What that means is if you hit these guys with a bolter, it's strength 4, your toughness 3, it'll wound you on a 3 or better, whatever, that's fine. But if someone hits you with a battle cannon, if someone hits you with a volcano cannon, it doesn't matter, they can never wound you on a 2. It means that a wound roll of a 1 and a wound roll of a 2 always fail. You can only ever be wounded on a 3 at best. Now, if you combine this Death Korps mini transhuman ability with the squad medic, you get a really quite durable unit. You see, what the medic does is it comes with a Death Korps medipack, and this allows you to ignore the first failed saving throw each turn. That means if your squad is hit by a las cannon and it is the first thing that's shot at this squad and it does manage to get through and kill a guy, it doesn't actually kill them. The first failed saving throw, be it from a bolt gun or from a las cannon or even a volcano cannon, it doesn't matter. The first failed saving throw, the damage is always reduced to 0. And that is once per turn. So over the course of 5 turns, if you manage to keep that medic alive in the squad, you could potentially ignore 5 casualties from this squad. On top of this, the medic gets the medic keyword. Now, what this means is you have access to a stratagem called Battlefield Surgery. Battlefield Surgery is 1 CP and it's used in the command phase. And what it does is very simply is it brings back D3 models to the squad. So often you'll probably want the medic to be the last guy to go in the squad, because even if he, after morale, is just the one remaining squad member, you can spend 1 CP and you can bring back D3 models. On average, you're going to get 2 guys back, which means if you lose everyone but the medic, you can spend 1 CP and potentially bring back 2 melter guns or other special weapons, maybe a sergeant and a voxcaster guy. It really does mean that if you don't finish this squad off, it's going to start regrowing, and it's actually a pretty decent choice for that Battlefield Surgery stratagem. Now, on top of these datasheet abilities and stratagems, Death Korps can also benefit from orders to increase their durability even further. If you give a Death Korps Krieg squad the take cover order, it means they count as being in light cover. Even though they're stood out in the open, they count as being in light cover, which gives them +1 to their armor save, which means suddenly you've got basic infantry running around on a 4+ save with mini transhuman, ignoring the first failed wound. If they take a couple of casualties, you can start regrowing them. Overall, it's really good. Now, the best bit about take cover is not if you're already in light cover and you give them the take cover order, they get the benefit of dense cover, which means they get -1 to hit as well. So suddenly you've got a Deathcore squad with -1 to hit, with a 4+ save, with a mini transhuman ability, ignoring the first failed wound. That is incredibly durable. It makes these guys great at holding objectives and being able to really take a lot more punishment than your standard infantry squad. Now, speaking of firepower and melter guns and things like that, the Deathcore actually have some really decent damage output. In fact, they can take the most special weapons out of any infantry squad that you've got access to, even more so than the Cadian shock troops. You see, like I said at the beginning of this video, they come with the plasma gun guy as standard. In addition to this, you can take 2 more special weapons. Now, you can't take 2 more plasma guns, but you can take 2 more of all of the other special weapons, such as snipers or, my personal favorite, melters. On top of this, you can potentially also give your sergeant a plasma pistol, which means in total you'd have 2 melter guns, a plasma pistol, and a plasma gun. That makes for a total of 4 special weapons in a single infantry squad. If you count the medic and the Vox guy as specialists as well, you're looking at a unit that actually has 6 specialists in it and only 4 basic troopers. That's pretty wild for a standard infantry unit in the guard. If you count the medic as a specialist as well, then you're looking at a unit that actually has 5 specialists and only 5 basic troopers in the squad. That's pretty wild for an Imperial Guard infantry unit. However, realistically, you're not going to take that many special weapons, and basically it comes down to 2 very important reasons. The first one being your secondary objectives. Right now, at the time of recording this video, one of the best secondaries that you can take for your Imperial Guard is Inflexible Command, and a big part of making that work is having as many Voxcasters in your army as possible. However, with the Deathcore, they do have kind of a wacky option in their datasheet, which is that you get the plasma gun guy as standard, but if you want to take a Voxcaster, you've got to swap your plasma gun out for that Voxcaster, which means that if you want to have more firepower, you're going to have to potentially sacrifice your ability to score secondary objectives. Now, that does put you in kind of a tricky place as a player, because on the one hand, you do want that killing potential, but on the other hand, you don't necessarily win games from killing your opponent. You win games by scoring the most points. So when really it comes down to crunch time and push comes to shove, you're probably going to put that plasma gun down and pick up that Voxcaster, and more than likely you're going to run a unit which has got a couple of melter guns and a Vox in it. The other very important reason that you're probably not going to end up loading up on all of the upgrades for your sergeant and maybe taking the medic on top of that as well is quite simply that Deathcore are kind of pricey. In fact, Deathcore are the most expensive out of all of your troop choices by a decent margin as well. At a standard rate, they come 10 points more expensive than a Cadian shock trooper squad. And realistically, you're going to want to chuck that medibag in there, which means that you're looking at an additional 5 points. So overall, a Deathcore Krieg squad, more often than not, is going to be 15 points more than a Cadian squad before you even start looking at sergeant upgrades. So because of these secondary objectives and how expensive they can be in terms of points, you tend to find that the best way of running your new Deathcore Krieg squads is kind of middle of the road. You want to take that medipack upgrade because you know it is a decent durability boost for the unit, but then you probably want to then just give your sergeant a free upgrade such as a bolter or a bolt pistol and chainsword, and you'll probably stick with taking that Voxcaster to help you do the secondaries and having 2 melter guns as your special weapons. Now in that loadout you actually get a pretty good amount of firepower. 2 melter guns is nothing to sniff at, but then you've got to take into account that these guys won't be as killy as your Cadians. But in my opinion, I don't think that comparing the killing power of the Deathcore to the killing power of the Cadians is the right way to look at these units. If you want the best damage output possible at the most efficient price point, then of course Cadians will do that. They can take the double plasma, they can get the Cadian shock troop ability on their datasheet, which gives them exploding 6 with their lasguns. They are geared towards doing damage. But if you take a look at your Deathcore, they are not geared. Look at their datasheet abilities, look at the medic upgrade they can get. They're not geared towards doing damage, they're geared towards taking damage. So really, as the player, you need to ask yourself, what do I want my infantry to do in my list? If you're looking for a more durable, tanky infantry squad, you're sick of them just getting blown off the table in a couple of turns, and that's very frustrating. It's making it difficult for you to take ground and hold objectives, then you probably want to start considering the Death Korps of Krieg. If you're a player who's more focused on firepower, damage output, you don't really care, yeah, the guards are going to die, but as long as they take a chunk out of the enemy with them whilst they're doing it, then you probably want to consider yourself some Cadian shock troops. Now, before we wrap up today's video, there are another couple of small points that I want to raise about the Death Korps. The first one being that they do tend to benefit from other regimental doctrines other than Born Soldiers. Born Soldiers, great, don't get me wrong, they've got las guns, they've got some special weapons, and always having that ability to auto wound on a hit roll of a 6 is very, very nice. But in comparison to things like the Cadian shock troops and other infantry choices in your army, they don't have as much firepower output. Really, like I said, you're looking at a couple of melter guns as your main damage from these guys, which means there's not a huge amount of volume of fire there to trigger Born Soldiers. Also, melter guns are incredibly short range, and they really could benefit from regimental doctrines such as heirloom weapons and maybe swift as the wind to make sure they can get into range quickly and start doing damage as soon as possible. However, if I was going to be totally honest with you, taking these regiment traits is very much a nice to have for the Death Korps of Krieg. At the end of the day, they'll perform just fine with Born Soldiers. It is such a nice just little damage upgrade that you can slap across your whole army. And at the end of the day, remember what we were talking about earlier, guys, which is whilst these guys do have decent damage output, their main job is to take damage. So even if they're not the best choice for a Born Soldiers army, they'll still do absolutely fine, and they'll still fulfill their intended purpose of taking some punches to the face and holding some objectives. Another subtle advantage of the Death Korps of Krieg is they are a fantastic choice for those people who are getting into the guard for the first time and who are trying to get their first 1,000 points or 2,000 points list together. And the simple reason for this is because they are pricey in terms of points. So you don't need as many of them to start hitting that 1k threshold, that 2k threshold. And before you know it, you'll have a few of these squads together and you'll be happily playing your 2,000 point games. So it means from a newer player perspective, it's less models that you need to manage on the tabletop. And from a real life money perspective, you won't need to buy as many infantry boxes if you focus on Death Korps of Krieg. But overall, I think the Death Korps of Krieg are a very decent infantry option. You can certainly do worse. Hell, you could pick Catachans. They're a terrible infantry option. Now, I've scored the Death Korps of Krieg as a 7 out of 10. They very much are Mordian approved. Now, the reason I've taken a few points off them is because they are kind of expensive. So from a veteran commander's point of view, it means that you do have to start picking between how much infantry you want and how many big tanks and stuff you want. So that does hold them back a little bit. And also the fact that they don't gel with Born Soldiers as well as other infantry choices does mean that they do rely upon some specialist regimental doctrines to really sort of get the most out of them. And because of this, I do think they require a little bit more thought than just being slapped in a list. So that's why I've taken a few points off them. But guys, I still feel very positively about this unit, and I think overall they are a very good choice. I think that most Krieg players will be very happy. The fact they've got a pretty good data sheet and the one that can really emphasize and show off what it's like to be a Krieg trooper, to be tough, to be durable, to always be able to drive forward and take the fight to the enemy. I really do feel that is very good for the Krieg players. But I suspect that most guard players will default to Cadians simply because they are a bit cheaper and they are probably the best bang for buck in terms of damage output. But those are my thoughts on the new Death Korps of Krieg. What do you think? Do you like the data sheet? Would you pay for that medic upgrade? Let me know down in the comments section below. If you enjoyed today's video, then make sure you smash that like button like Colonel Yurton smashing the big red button, and also make sure you subscribe to never miss an episode. If you really enjoyed today's video and you want to go the extra mile, or you found it particularly helpful, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. It's thanks to my channel members and my Patreon supporters that I'm able to do this gig full time now, and it means I can put more effort into every single video. I can try out units, not just theory hammer them, and I can put extra research into every single episode. Now, one of the biggest perks of being a channel member or Patreon supporter is access to the Mordian Glory Discord, which is a community of over 600 100 active members. And there's always someone to chat to in there about memes or tactics or hobbying or painting. And there's a hell of a lot of experience in that community as well. In fact, we have some of the highest ranked guard players in the ITC at the moment inside that community. So if you're a newer player and you're thinking, I could really do with some people that could point me in the right direction. Should I buy this? Is this unit any good? What about this first list? Could someone review it for me? Then please, I highly recommend that you consider joining the Discord, becoming a channel member, and that way you can draw upon that knowledge. It really is a fantastic resource. And I'd just like to take a moment to say a big thank you to the latest channel members and Patreon supporters. So a huge thank you to Ben Spears, Blade Little, S. Bratt, Paddy, Jeden Knight, Ralph Risk, John Greenfield, Jeffrey Cole, Ozzy Mandricles, Electro Halo 8, Max Dealey, and the Wizard MF. Also, a big shout out to the latest Patreon supporters. So thank you to David Newby, Jessica, Simon Olsen, Max, Dart, Sean, Mark Lee Sim, and Knack. Thank you guys for your ongoing Patreon support. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to say a special personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the Call of Duty when it comes to supporting the channel. So a massive thank you to Bonbon Vert, Phil French, Ross Miller, Tekwal, Alex Dengal, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Swordfish Trombone, Diesel Fox, Tao Tom, and of course, August Varney, the one-man super chatting army. Massive thank you to all of you guys for your very generous support. It is a big part of how I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time. Thank you to everyone for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. And of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.